Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Impossible World podcast. I am your host, GRINN, and a lot of you are wondering what the damned hell is going on. Well, hello, and hi, my friends. Good to have you back for some people who are here way back in the day, way back in the day, that we were actually doing this podcast, and it was insanely long and weird and it was made for a specific kind of weirdo, and I don't know if you're one of them, but for people who have found my channel through 1,000 other means, let me explain what this podcast is, because this is me kind of redoing it / getting back into the flow of things. Now, yes, I know 1,000 people have a podcast. That's not why I'm actually making this. Is because I think it's a good marketing thing. Hell no, I already make long videos. You don't need more time of me. But the reason why I started this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, is because I have this thing with me that's always been a part of me, where I think, I don't know how to put it, but like I have trouble sleeping because whenever I close my eyes, my mind gets set on fire. Like I think of like 1,000 other things back to back, and I can't quiet my mind. In fact, there's a Let's Talk we actually made a couple days back, where I actually talked about what it was like having my brain quieted for the first time, and I fucking hated it. Anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about. The reason why I made this podcast was because something that I do constantly is I love ideas. I love storytelling. I love worlds that people can create and ideas that come from that. You know, it's why I fell in love with anime and video games and all of these forms of media, because they're a bastion for wonderful and brilliant ideas. So to me, every single thing I do, I can't help but whenever I see something, think about a cool way to tell that through the guise of a story. So if you see an interesting premise in like a Marvel movie for superpowers, or if you see an interesting premise for like a drama point or character development that makes you really like this character, some people would be like, that's cool. Me, it ignites my brain like a fucking firework, and I just lose myself in the idea of it and trying to make it my own idea and seeing what I could do to add to that idea and make it better. I don't know what you would call that, but it's what I can't help but do. Making it sound like a sickness. It's more of just a pain. But for me, I made this podcast because one of the things that I constantly do is think of impossibly weird and strange and elaborate worlds in the span of a second. Almost to the point where it started to become a kind of a problem. One of the reasons why I kind of stopped the podcast is because it was kind of becoming a little bit of a problem, where like it was almost starting to facilitate me thinking about these ideas a lot more, and having to like go in depth with them a lot more, which I already was spending a lot of like any free time I had when I was exercising or whatever thinking about cool premises, because it's just where your mind wanders, and my mind wandered there. So I kept thinking about all these kind of weird premises, and like how this story would take place and how this character would have this and react in this way, and it kind of started to devour my kind of, sounds weird, but life progression, you know? Like, it's kind of sad, but if you start falling in love with a world that doesn't exist more than your actual world, then you'll just start to go to that world more than your reality. Maybe because it's better, or maybe it's because it's more interesting, or maybe it's because you have some sort of control there in the real world you don't. I don't know what it could be, but all I know is it wasn't the best for me, having not tempered it at all. I just kept going rampant, whereas like I need to improve certain things in my life. I want to become the man that I so dearly want to become, and this is a part of that, becoming that man, but it's also like it's becoming too much, to the point where I'm not even living in the real world. I'm living in this place in my head, and it became a lot. So I started to rear back. I actually had to like full on be like, okay, I need to stop this part of me a little bit, so that I can start fostering this other part, and then I'll come back to this, because this is something that I can't fight. Like, it's where my mind always wants to go when it's bored, when it's thinking about stuff, or when it sees something cool. But I needed to tailor it back, and I'm happy to report that I'm at a point where I think I can delve back in and dip my toes in it. But I won't lie, the last couple podcasts that we did, I will explain the podcast overarching theme and all that stuff. The last couple podcasts we did was kind of a bit of a pain, because I started to fall apart when it comes to what I like about storytelling, and I started to basically try, like, you guys have no idea, or maybe you guys do, maybe you guys have a pretty good idea about how I feel when I'm talking about this, but have you guys ever gotten the feeling of when you're explaining a story that you've come up in your head, that you never do it justice, you know? Like, you can never explain things in the way that you wish they were explained to incite the same emotions that you felt in that moment. You can never really feel like you're attaining the thing and like sharing an idea properly. So then you start going even harder into explaining that idea and like going into like the dialogue and then the world creation and the environment, and you try to do all of these things perfectly to where it just kind of it gets messy. Almost like too much detail can make something annoying, or like too much. To where I started to find that, and I feel like that's the one thing I want to try to fight with every tooth and nail that I have. With that is the notion of trying to fight with that idea of, hey, what if we just tried to tell a cool story, and I don't need to explain like how they talk to one another, because dialogue is something that you explain in post. If you were creating an actual story, I can tell you guys what I think their personality could maybe be, and then you guys could understand how they would interact within the story that I'm trying to tell you guys. So yeah, those are some regrets from the previous podcasts that I filmed. Also, if you have no idea, again, about what this is, this was a podcast that I made because I really, really love storytelling, and I wanted to do that for you guys. I watch a ton of media. Not really. I watch a good bit of media, but not crazy amounts. But every single time I watch one, I've grappled onto an idea that they talk about that I like in a story. And I would love to introduce that to you guys, so that anyone who is like me out in the world, who has an imagination that just kind of jumps around like a monster, you can feed it, you can sate it, you can kind of experiment with these cool ideas. As well as I know so many of you are fantastic and wonderfully creative people who are also writers, and all of those things. So if I could share this part of me, and you could share some of those parts of you with me as well, that'd be absolutely lovely. So that's the whole reason, that's the soul of this podcast, if you will, is the reason why I made it. It wasn't because I was trying to cash in on trends, even though I watch podcasts so much. It wasn't because of anything like that. It was because I just really like storytelling, and I more or less I like worlds and crazy ideas that are insane, and they're just fun to play around with in your brain. And people can come at you with, oh, you're vicariously living through this, you're doing that, and they may be right, but yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, there's parts of this podcast I'm pretty sure will be cringe at some point because of me trying to express an idea and it kind of backfiring. But that's the way it's got to be. I totally am okay with that being an outcome that could potentially happen, but hopefully there's some good with the maybe speculative bad. Anyways, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the Impossible World podcast. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host. I've introduced myself like 3 times. Hi. I think we did enough of the busy work that I kind of wanted to let you guys know about. Again, just bullet points. We're getting back into the podcast. The reason why I had to stay away is because I had to take care of some mental shit, more or less. I had to make sure I was doing some self work rather than just escaping into these weird ideas and worlds. Third thing is regrets I have for the podcast was that I kind of got caught up in like the nitty-gritty detail aspect of it, and I don't think that's fun, especially not for the soul of this podcast, which is spreading ideas and letting your imagination play with it and take it into any direction you possibly want. And then the third thing being, hi, if you've never seen this podcast, this is something that I did way back in the day, where I just kind of, the soul of it is me telling you guys cool story concepts, ideas I had. So the last one I think we did was me talking about how in this genre of like, there's like a medieval world where you see the perception of a sorcerer, you see the perception of a warrior, you see the perception of a mage, but you rarely see the perception of a healer. Oh my God, don't. I know some of you guys are like, there's an anime right now about a healing. No, not what I'm talking about. Okay. No, but I wanted there to be basically this, and again, I had this idea of Berserk meets a main character that's a woman who's a healer, and that there's this main guy who basically fights like an animal, like just with reckless abandon, and because she's a support, he basically lifts her up, or she lifts him up, allows him to be reckless and crazy, and then they become this crazy powerful team. And that being the kind of catalyst of being able to show that there is a value to a support or a healer in this mythical genre of like anime or books, but the healer is always given such a short end of the stick. And I think this is a way to make it really cool, is if you made it like this very happy looking, like drawn, I always think of it like through the guise of an anime. This beautifully drawn anime with this majestic, fantastic healer that's like a fantastic. Or in fact, no, I think I went a little weird with it. I made her like a punk rocker chick, and then I would love the notion of whenever you see this one character on screen, like the art style changes to like Berserk, like way more gritty and etc. And when you see him fight, like the saturation from the world leaves and black and white, and then all you see is the color red. And of course it's showcasing how brutal he fights, but also he has no way of repairing himself. And that being the underlying kind of problem with healing magic is, yes, you can heal something, but pain is still a consistent thing in this world. So even if you can heal from a stab wound, it hurts to get stabbed, I would imagine. So most people are still going to aim to not feel the feeling of getting stabbed. So they're probably going to use a bunch of armor, which will lower their mobility, which may hinder them in victory and etc. But there being this crazy dude who is fine with the maybe he has like damaged nerves or whatever, but he can actually manage the pain, and she can make him stay alive by healing, right? So that was the idea that I told you guys last time about on the podcast. But this is the main thing that I wanted to do. In fact, this is actually part 2 to me being back on this podcast. I filmed a podcast a couple of days ago talking to you guys about a brand new idea that I had that I wanted to let you guys know about, and that's probably the longest podcast I've ever made. Hot damn, it is so fucking long, okay? I'm so sorry. But anyway, so this is actually my second podcast back, but I wanted to make this one go before that one because the last thing that we talked about, what took essentially 7 parts, probably more than that actually, was this world that I was telling you guys about, the thing that started the podcast, more or less the thing that made me want to even like talk to you guys about this, is because I had this idea that I thought would be fun just to talk to you guys about it. So for the people who didn't tune into all of the previous episodes, which is totally cool, I'll try to recap to some extent in the fastest way possible. I had this right around the time that I made the podcast. It was around Halloween. One of my favorite Halloween movies is Halloween Town, and then in the movie Halloween Town 2, at the very end, there's this premise of on Halloween night when the clock strikes midnight, everyone who is dressed up as the monsters that they're dressed up as become them. And I always thought, and again, the movie resolves it in like 2 seconds, but I always thought that's a really crazy premise. Like, what happens, and as a person like myself who loves monster movies to pieces and loves Halloween more than Christmas or even my birthday, like, it was just a cool idea in general. So I wanted to play with that idea, so I did, and it turned into wildfire in my head. And then the other thing that I wanted to play with at the same time, I just finished watching this TV series, which I would highly advise, called Good Omens. And it's basically the story of an angel and a demon trying to stop the apocalypse from the second incarnation of Satan, basically, Satan's spawn. It's a story you've heard before, but the way they execute friendship in this show is the best I've ever seen it done. The both Crowley and the angel have such an amazing relationship when it comes to just friendship, like just being really good to one another and like what friendship should be and all of these things. That I love the notion they accepted each other, and with like, even though Crowley is like a crazy driver in the show, the angel was never like, you're a bad person, I hate you, you need to change your driving. He just was like, no, this is just how he drives. Is what it is. You know, he accepted the negative, and it wasn't even like a negative to him. He was just kind of like, this is a part of him, who cares? This doesn't affect me. Why would I give too much of a shit whether he kind of is a reckless driver, you know? He's an angel. He's not like he's gonna, or he's a demon. It's not like he's gonna die from this, you know, getting in a car accident. So yeah, there was like the things that they didn't, yeah, it just seemed like a really, really amazing friendship in that show. So those were the 2 things I liked and I wanted to mess around with. I wanted to create a story with the foundation of there being this friendship, not like a love interest, not this and that. We might get into that, and I did plan to get to that eventually, but for there to be at the core of the story a friendship where there was not even a doubt in the viewer's mind that they would ever choose to betray each other, or that they would ever choose to abandon each other. It was just that kind of friendship where they're like, no, you could have the whole world, but you have to backstab your friend. Not happen. Like, it was just that, like, the viewer themselves would know they'll never take that deal. And that to me would be a cool story plot, as well as the plot of creating this world of monsters and how the world would adapt to that thing. So as I was thinking about this and coming up with all these crazy ideas, I also thought, I kind of don't like the idea of like coming at this angle from like a drama angle of like, oh my god, vampires and werewolves all have to coexist together, and oh, how do humans adapt to their... I don't want that. It seemed like a drama angle, and I don't want the drama. I want the cool factor. I want the evolution, the adaptation, all those things. So I implied another drop into this thing. After Halloween night takes place, both of our main characters kind of transform into their respective outfits, because whatever you're wearing on Halloween night, you become, with the addition of, I added some sort of weird speculation where if you did some sort of stupid hybrid thing, like if you dressed up as like a wolf, but also like you had a skull on your face, it would try to, it would like be impossible, but if you had a strong enough will or something, you could actually become this weird hybrid thing. Anyways, I got a little complicated with it. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Anyways, the simplest answer, ladies and gentlemen, is typically the best, especially in storytelling. No one likes complexity, okay? Unless you're Hunter x Hunter, like drip feeding it to you. But even then, Hunter x Hunter has like a really smart way of communicating its power structure. Anyways, so I had the idea of also, like, there's these three things: the friend, and what do you call it? The notion that on Halloween night you become the monster. But then the third thing that I kind of found towards the end, after all of the events take place, after they turn into the monster and they go on this kind of weird expedition kind of thing. We'll talk about it, we'll recap. Basically that this god was the one that did that. On Halloween night, this god basically said, hey, you make fun of monsters. Where I come from, in my dimension or whatever, monsters are lovely, and the fact that you make fun of them, here's my way of paying you back, you selfish pricks, for making fun of these monsters. And then, of course, at the end of all this, after Hell Night, which is what I called when everyone turned into their monsters, basically the main characters who kicked ass on Hell Night went and actually talked to this demigod, this huge god that turned everyone into monsters. And the demigod, after meeting the main character, has a change of heart, and he says, okay, I kind of fucked up, I misunderstood what you guys were doing, I didn't know humans actually appreciated monsters as much as I did, because the main character is like a freak who just loves monster movies and is that kind of weirdo. Anyways, I'm vicariously living through this main character a little bit. All right, don't look at me. Anyways, so the demigod realizes his blunders, so he says, okay, here, and he basically puts a bunch of these massive dungeons around the whole world. I know we're getting pretty out there. Fucking everyone's a monster. It's already out there. So this demigod does that, and now we have the third element, which is the notion of now there being a currency, now there being a dungeon, now there being this place where you need to go to commune with your monster, to like this place where you can go unleashed, to where the civil world can remain civil, but also the monstrous world can kind of thrive. And there being this kind of currency to things, and I kind of made this whole, we'll get into it. Anyways, we're not done the recap, so that's the overarching thing. So another thing that I wanted to mention within this whole archetype of story is, again, that friendship. So the main character is a cross, because on Halloween night, he was one of those weird monster-loving weirdos who made a hybrid monster. He was like, I'm going to be a werewolf, and I'm also going to be a necromancer, kind of lich king thing. So he chose to be that, and then when Halloween night came, he kind of popped off in a big way. And the thing that I regret about the story that I told you guys was that I kind of told you guys the specifics of things, and I just should have told you guys where I want them to end up, and you guys could have found out where you wanted that to be. Because I feel like I kind of lost it a couple times when I was talking about it, because it was just unnecessarily complicated. Like, oh, he transforms, he goes to this fucking graveyard, yada yada yada, too much. I get it. Regardless, okay, again, we're just trying to recap the story. So, long story short, everything is popping off on Halloween night. Everyone's getting turned into their monsters. The streets are chaos, and everything is insane. And then the main character bashes through his window because he turns into a werewolf, basically, and starts going on a rampage. But his werewolf takes him to this graveyard, and this graveyard actually has an artifact in it. Now, this is the kind of weird, this is why I liked the idea of it being like a demigod's game, is because the demigod had this idea of, okay, well, if people are able to embrace the chaos, they embrace their new self, then they can get rewarded. So, this demigod scattered a bunch of these artifacts throughout wherever there was monsters, essentially, the entire world. He spread out these artifacts. So if you were to make the most of it and actually make use of accept your new self and basically allow your monster to pull you towards these artifacts, you would have an incredible gain in terms of your survivability or your monster. So the main character's werewolf is running rampant. It doesn't kill anyone, but just takes him right to one of his artifacts. And his artifact basically helps him understand what's going on. It's kind of like their beginner artifact, which is like their skill tree. And again, it's getting very gamey. It'll stay that way. Anyways. So, this is the part that I wish I would have cleaned it up more. He eventually meets this other person. And in this previous podcast, I explained that this is basically this character, who is like the main character's friend, is very, very much built around the character of Crowley, because I really like the notion of there being this demon, but the main character accepting the negative and or the real parts that this demon may have to actually deal with, such as Crowley is a demon, so he actually feeds off of negative energy. And the main character has an amazingly big appetite. Not only that, but Crowley is, he's a craftsman. I always like that notion in things, and I feel like that would be a good fit for their kind of gang. So he crafts like weapons and shit and just devastates them. He also crafts his iconic car and like can do all that stuff. The main character is half werewolf and half lich, but the werewolf is incredibly hungry, so Crowley basically finds a way to make a shit ton of money, allowing the main character to just gorge, like eat a shit ton of food. Crowley pays for almost everything just like that. But the main character never bats an eye when Crowley like turns off the street lights or trips a person, because every single bit of negative like energy is what he eats. And instead of being like, you should not be such a bad person, the main character's like, no, this is how my friend survives. I'm not gonna let him die, so do what you gotta do. No judgment here. And that being the kind of coexisting kind of relationship and a part of it that they kind of have. But anyways, yeah, Crowley was made to be this, he dressed up as this like weird demon thing, went to a rave, ended up, yeah. Regardless, he also, I don't know how, this is something I also wish I would have made better, but Crowley dressed up as a demon, but it was also a craftsman, just because I needed a way for him to be a craftsman. I probably could have found a better way of doing it without making it excessively complicated in the beginning. I could have maybe added some sauce in the middle to make it less nightmarish. Anyways, long story short, they converge, they meet each other on Hell Night. And Crowley notices that this guy is weirdly calm, whereas everyone's going apeshit. There's this bastion of sanity in a world that is insane, but he also might be the craziest one out of all of us. Anyways, they start talking. Crowley gets kind of like won over by the fact that he's not losing his mind, and he kind of just goes with the flow, and the main character kind of understands that, hey, I feel like we should go try to find these things. They like try to find these artifacts, because he found one and it seems to explain a lot of what's going on with him. Maybe you can find one and explain a lot what's going on with you. And then they set off into basically chapter 1 or act 1 of Hell Night, which is him and Crowley on the town, going place to place, collecting artifact to artifact. And for Crowley, I had the most fun with this with Crowley, because the main character is a fucking werewolf. He's kind of just inherently fucking nonsense by default. He's kind of like the canon, whereas Crowley's the brains and like the mechanical aspect of things and deal making and stuff like that, bartering. The main character's kind of just like the power behind the spear. I had the most fun with talking about Crowley with the story, because Crowley was he was kind of nerfed, and the main character kind of helps him gain a shit ton of power, which therefore Crowley kind of is almost permanently indebted to the main character because of that. But the main character will never cash in that debt because he doesn't even see the debt. Because that was part of the whole like storytelling that I was trying to tell, is that the main character was just kind of like a good person who wants to understand the soul of a person. Anyways, one of the cool things is that Crowley's a craftsman, but one of the biggest problems with craftsmen and everything is that you actually have to like take a pickaxe and start mining rock, or like take apart a computer or something to get supplies to actually craft. So one of Crowley's like second artifacts, if I'm not mistaken, the order of it, I don't even remember my own story, I hate me. Anyways, one of Crowley's first artifacts that he actually get is a cane, and this cane allows him to deconstruct anything he points it at and like suck in the resources into his like weird inventory. That way it takes like, and that's kind of like the idea of Hell Night, of like these super powerful utility based things that happen if you're able to embrace your monster and you're able to run around the city on the town and collect these artifacts. They can massively give you an edge in understanding what you can do, and also just kind of fix a problem that you don't know you have. So that was the one that, and again, your monster kind of pulls you towards the ones that are yours, or the ones that are of the most inherent value to you. So of course, Crowley's biggest problem for a craftsman is not having to deconstruct things, which takes a shit ton of time. So here's the thing that allows him to just break down anything he points his cane at, dissolving things into matter and sucking it into this cane. Basically, it's like the eraser tool in Photoshop. You point, you just drag, and then gone. And there's like this just giant chunk, almost like a brush stroke out of whatever he pointed at. So yeah, that's kind of the notion. And again, the main character, he kind of, his thing is, again, fortifying less of like his issues, because his issues are more like power stuff. Like how, again, the main character's first thing he gets is like a werewolf item. The second thing he gets is his wraith gauntlet, which allows him to like basically be a summoner. So for those guys who don't know, which I'm sure a lot of you guys don't remember at this point, I don't even remember basically. Crowley is the craftsman. He's like the second main character. He's a craftsman. He's the brains. He's that kind of thing. He's the person who's gonna make it so no one backstabs them, all that stuff. The main character is this, again, he's the werewolf lich king kind of thing. So he's a summoner. He's a summoner and a werewolf. And the reason why I like this idea is because I had this thought of like this undead wraith-looking werewolf that's just huge. And when he screams, summons forth like an army of other wolves, and they just shred things. So that was a thing I wanted to get to later on, which we'll get to that later. So the whole point of this podcast, by the way, is wrapping up all of the previous ideas, more or less, that I had for this idea that we talked about. And I will come back to this idea, I'm sure of it. I just don't want to have this kind of hanging over my head. So yes, the night progresses, and I kept every week I kept telling you guys ideas that I had that I thought would be cool. And again, the idea of the main character, basically when he gets his like wraith gauntlet, when he finally wakes up his like necromancer inside of him. Maybe that's what I actually named it, necromancer. Yeah, I don't think I said wraith. I think he was like the Lich King / a necromancer. So finally there was this moment that I really thought was awesome in my head, and I'm not sure if I did any justice when I was telling you guys about it, but it was the notion of when he finally gets his like necromancer gauntlet. Oh right, that's how I phrased it. The main character has this realization of like the most truest human emotion that I could possibly think of, which is the emotion of survival. But not only survival, what survival can potentially be within the mind, which is, I want you to die. Which is like, okay, this monster is gonna come and rip off my leg, or is beating me, or maybe this wolf just bit off my sister's leg or something, and she's screaming in pain. There is this human nature to you that has, I think, one of the strongest human natures, which is the ability to survive. But right beside it is the ability for you to want something to die, because it wants to hurt you, because it threatens your survival. So if you want to survive, you want to stop the thing that is threatening your survival. Main character gets a gauntlet. He sees these kind of mummy-like shadows appear, and for whatever reason they're not attacking their enemies that are in the graveyard, which is where his necromancer like gauntlet was. And Crowley's about to get taken over by these enemies, and the main character keeps saying like, fight, go get them, move, like attack, and these mummies refuse to move. So eventually he kind of gets frustrated, doesn't know what to do, and then he finally sees that Crowley's about to get like dead, basically pushed on and devoured by these zombies, is what they were, because of course it's a graveyard. So finally the main character says, ripped into shreds, and he says it in like just a fucking evil, ravenous way, because it's like something's trying to harm something that I have so much inherent value for, that it's like you're coming after my own life, and therefore you need to go, you need to be gone. So he says, rip them to shreds, and these fucking things, these mummies, boom, take off, and they sound like they weigh 1,000 pounds. There's like boom, and then they shred everything. So there were moments like that that I talked about throughout the thing. Again, if you guys are like, hey, I've never checked out this podcast, but I just, I might go back and watch the previous things if that's what it is. That's a lot of what it is. I probably don't do as good a job as I probably could have explaining it. But if you like storytelling and what I'm putting down this far, then maybe go recap. Anyways, to cycle through everything, him and Crowley make it through Hell Night. As the sun sets, climbing up, they both have a ton of gadgets. Go watch the previous podcast if you want to know about all of them. Again, there are a bunch of ways to kind of patch their inherent problems, and I also go over their like abilities, which again I think is fine, but also, it's probably good. I think I went too ham because I was trying to show you guys that like my brain thinks of like almost the whole whole thing, the whole fucking pie. It's not just like wouldn't this be cool if this happened? No, it's like, no, I think about the skills, I think about what they potentially could, what their skill tree looks like, and all these kinds of things. So then this is part 2 of what kind of happens. They end Hell Knight, they got a bunch of artifacts, and they have like an incredible grasp of what they are now. They've accepted, they've embraced it to the extreme, and of course, out of all of the people who became monsters, almost none of the people were as vicious in their acceptance of their new selves and in their growth as him and Crowley. So this demigod who made all this come into fruition, the night that Hell Knight ends and they finally go to sleep, this demigod pulls them into out of their dreams and into his reality and talks and interviews both of them. And Crowley is just a joker. He's like an asshole. He's kind of like, you're an idiot. You're a dumbass. I don't even want to talk to you. Get out of my face. Kind of this nonsense thing. Of course, Crowley doesn't know he's talking to a fucking demigod that made all this stuff happen. But it's just in his dream and how he's talking. But the main character gets pulled in and talks to this demigod. Now, this demigod is kind of... he's like again, I would love for there to be this like anime kind of nonsense moment, but for the main character to kind of start gushing about monsters, and for the demigod to be like, holy shit, you like monsters as much as me? And then it becomes this weird like, oh, talk to me about monsters, and they're just gushing over their own weird infatuation with these things. And essentially the demigod realizes that, holy shit, this guy is just like me. He loves these things. He has an appreciation for them, and this is their way of honoring them, and accepting the strange and embracing the weird, and loving the abnormal, I guess. And so the demigod basically realizes his blunder and says, hey, so I could have just left you guys all monsters and let you guys basically have to figure it out. Vampires need blood, whatever. Werewolves get sated by the moon, but when they're not, they get angry, whatever. Demons need despair, whatever. They could have just basically pieced out and been like, eat that shit, you bad people, but he realizes his blunder, so he basically gamifies the world to some extent. And like I said, he summons forth these tombs. Now you guys be like, well, Grin, what the fuck's the point of the tombs? Well, and this is kind of like the demigod is like a dimensional kind of weird being. This is gonna be too far out of an idea for you guys. And again, you guys could take this any which way you want. This could be a benevolent god who things just kind of happen. But the way I made it was he's like this dimensional being, this dimensional god, and he basically summons forth on the world tombs. But in those tombs are a currency. With every single time you fight in the tombs, you collect treasure in the tombs, you do all of these kind of things, you gain this currency. Now, another thing that came up all over the world are these weird old-timey kind of like snake oil looking wagons with all of these incredibly strange till workers, whatever you call it. The person who like sell, like you're the person you talk to buy stuff. Like, oh, I would like to buy a snack in like a dollar store or something like that, like the clerk, the person who's at the counter. They all look very strange, but they also offer you a vast variety of things. They can offer you blood. They can offer you moon essence. They can offer you despair in a cup, in a popsicle or something. So again, this is where we start getting like to the fun aspect of it, where like I didn't want the story to be like super balls to the walls, and that's kind of evident in the way that I kind of explained it, where a lot of things just kind of happened and the main characters didn't like have this existential crisis. They were kind of just accepted the madness, kind of like you're stuck in a Tim Burton movie and you're just kind of like, holy shit, I guess this is our life now. So anyways, again, so the premise is, if you're a monster and you want to survive, you need this currency, and this currency can help you buy the things from these dimensional vendors. And because these tombs were brought on by this dimensional god, the currency is what they kind of trade in. So, again, and how I kind of made sense of this, and like the back deep story was that these dimensional people can go to a world where people like breathe blood or something, right? Like where blood is just in an incredible supply to where it's not actually a negative. So they just take that and they go to another world and sell it where it's valuable. Anyways, so yeah, that's how the whole system works. But because not everybody wants to go into the tombs, it's dangerous. There's beasts, monsters, and all kinds of horrors down in these dungeons. But the reason why Demigod sets it up like this is because his whole thing is he wants you to understand and accept what you are. And the more you face trials, the more you understand about yourself, and the more you'll accept this part of yourself, and the more you will grow. And you will survive. And that's like his whole thing, that he loves monsters or loves every kind of being on the planet, is that everyone has this immense desire to live, to survive. And he sees so much courage and etc. come from that. So he wants human beings to kind of do that, and he knows human beings operate best under that as well. So he makes it kind of a challenge. He makes it like a thing. But not everyone in the world, like if, again, multiple people were turned on Halloween night into various things. And again, I think I even made a couple things to show that like the demigod wasn't just an evil bastard, but if a girl, like a little girl, like a child, kid, okay, dressed up as like a gross witch, he would take mercy on them and make them a witch, but not give them like a giant nose and boils. But if you were an adult and like put on a bunch of boils or made yourself a zombie with like gross flesh hanging off, and you tried to make yourself look as disgusting as possible, he'd be like, idiot, and you would be stuck looking like a gross monster. So yeah, he had this like benevolence to him, but also not. So again, there are children who, like a girl who's a vampire, a tiny girl, and again, that's one of the things I even talked about in the thing, was there's like this tiny girl who's like, there's like these new vendors, and him and Crowley are one of the first people to go actually like has the courage to go talk to them. And again, the only reason why him and Crowley have the courage that they do is because they're together, because they didn't have to take it on alone. And that's kind of like the overarching story, is we wouldn't have benefited if we didn't have each other, therefore I'm never not going to have your back, you know? So anyways, him and Crowley go and talk to this vendor, and he's like super jovial, happy, almost like a circus clown, like just super, just like dissolves the tension of things. So him and Crowley both ask what the hell's going on, or like what's your whole deal, and then he gives them their respective things on the house. They're like what do you call it? So again, what do you call it? I gave the main character moon bars, and that helps to kind of like relax his wolf, along with copious amounts of food. And he gives Crowley, like, I think it's despair tears or something, but it's like just like I don't know what it is. Let's say that it's like a sucker. It's a sucker with a bunch of like negativity in it, a bunch of like sadness and sorrow. And his demon like eats it, just devours that aspect of human emotion. Anyways, when I was talking about this in a bunch of parts ago, I talked about how there was like this scared little girl with who was like walking up to them and like kind of tugged on Crowley's back, like what's happening, almost like she's nervous to go and talk to the person. And it wasn't Crowley, it was the main character. So the main character kind of like gives her a push almost, and like helps guide her up to the counter. And she's kind of scared, nervous, and then the person basically plops down a juice box, and it's a blood juice box, so this little vampire girl can basically get herself taken care of. And after that, everyone kind of starts bull rushing the thing to like get the things that can sate their animal hunger, their instincts, and all these things. And him and Crowley fuck off. But that's like the kind of overarching thing. So that's the world now that you guys get to go play with. Is now, yes, everyone was turned into monsters, but now the demigod made a mistake, so now he made it so that almost like a grand challenge for humanity of like, if you can accept yourself and embrace the new normal and not get caught up with this nonsense of what you look like, and realizing that other people may have a different affinity to things to you, and that it's not about vilifying those things, but it's about understanding those things and finding a way to exist alongside them. Doesn't mean you have to accept everything. Like again, vampires aren't okay to just shred and rip things to shreds. But you should understand that if like a vampire's hungry, there's going to be a thing, you know. Same thing as like if a person was had the shit kicked out of him every day by his dad, and he has like a rebellious side of him, like you're not going to be shocked at that outcome, you know what I mean? So it's kind of playing with that weird idea. Doesn't mean it's okay for him to go beat up people, but it means you understand where he's coming from, and maybe there's a way that you could help him with like therapy and all these other things, right? Anyways, getting a little off topic. So that was what we talked about. Now we're getting really close to where we actually ended it. So and throughout this whole idea, I was kind of sprinkling ideas that I thought would be cool of like how the world reacts, and how the whole like world reacts, and how they adjust to things really quickly. Anyways, we spent a lot of time just recapping things, but this is like 6 parts, like an hour and a half a piece of me talking about this, so I'm doing pretty good. All right. So then one of the ideas that I had that I again, and this is how I want to kind of change how I talked about things, and how I talk about things in the future. But I would love to come at you guys with, I think this is a cool idea, and I would like to interject it into this part of the world. Now, how we get here doesn't really matter. But the idea that I had was, I love the idea of a base that could be upgraded. And when I was thinking about this idea, my mind jumped to 1,000 different things. I was watching shows like Altered Carbon, where there is this beautiful like a hotel, but there's also this like cyber AI that kind of guides you and is super kind to you, and basically like tries to make you have the most hospitable time possible, but they're super clingy with the residents. They like make sure they're safe, they make sure they're okay, they always ask how they're going. They're like the best therapist you could ever want, but they're also really clingy. If you don't come back home, they're like, where were you? I was worried, you know? And I always thought that was a really fun sentiment. But also, I thought, well, what if, again, echoing that same thing, so both of those ideas played with each other. And basically, this was my idea. Not my idea. It's probably already done. That could be said for this whole series. I'm a filthy cheat who could be taking everything from anybody because no one has an original idea ever. Anyways, my idea was, okay, him and Crowley find this house, and this is maybe the last artifact that they have as kind of like a final boon that nobody took on Hell Night. And it was just under the cutoff point. And anyways, they go into this old abandoned, like somewhat looking mansion, but it's really gross and grubby and like wet and cold. And they go into this location, and they're met with this weird like doll. It almost looks like, well, not doll, but it's like a fully like a woman who has like a woman form. But they're doll-like. Her face is like cracked because it looks like it's porcelain and it's cracked. And her clothes are disheveled and full of cobwebs and spiders and all these things. So she just looks like wrecked, basically. Like again, think of like a human doll, but like old as shit, thrown away, broken, and forgotten. Long story short, this is the spirit of the house, the actual spirit of the house, very similar to Altered Carbon. So first of all, the main character signs a deal that says, okay, I am the owner of this house, and then immediately starts doing things that blows the housekeeper / soul of the house away. Like he starts giving her a ton of his power, so that she can actually like start rebuilding the house and start making things better. And also he starts giving her like a shit ton of money as things progress. And basically the overarching story that I wanted to quit with this is that the main character selflessly keeps taking care of this, whereas this thrown away doll was basically just forgotten. Like everything was expected of for her to do everything, and in the end no one even wanted her, and they threw her away anyway. And they let the house go to shit, and they just left. Whereas the main character is the complete opposite of that, and is like she, for the first time, she's feeling what it is to actually have someone who is like giving and taking care of this person and actually feeling like they're receiving things, and that only makes her like even more baffled, but also even more want to grow because she's not used to that, right? So and again, a mechanic that I love is that yes, it's super cool when you have like a base of operation that grows to be this fucking palace of beauty and power and everything. But I thought it'd be really cool if also she grew with the house. So with every single time the main character and Crowley upgrade the house, with like a wing where Crowley can do experiments so that he can make better weapons, with like a wing of like a more yard so that the main character can run free when he's doing his werewolf, for more rooms so that the people that they eventually accrued over going into the dungeons, meeting people, different monsters, they can find more people and basically make more rooms. With every single upgrade, she starts becoming less and less broken. Her face is no longer cracked. Her skin doesn't even look like porcelain anymore. It looks like an actual living person. And she eventually looks just beautiful, like the most beautiful person you've ever seen in your life. And that to be this thing of like, if you take a person who was like thrown away, forgotten, and treated like shit, and you say, I'm not going to give up on you and I'm going to make you great. and I'm never going to give up on you. And you keep doing that, and you keep doing that. And of course, by nature of her being a good person, she also gives back to the people. Of course, her like the people who are being sweet to her. By doing it over and over and over again, you make that person shine so beautifully and so bright. And that being the kind of overarching story that I wanted to kind of echo. And that's the way I wanted to go. And a lot of times when I was telling you guys this story for the first time, I stopped going because I wanted to wait for like, okay, well, eventually I'll tell them that, a thing that I was thinking that would be cool was with every upgrade that you make to this house, she gets more and more beautiful and fixed. And it's kind of like this overarching like thing of like taking care of someone and like paying something forward and not just expecting anything. And also that was another thing. I wanted the main character to basically be like stupidly helpful without understanding what his helpfulness means, and that's it. Like, so he just, again, the whole time he's just giving constantly to this house, just making it better, building it up, giving it resources, and the whole while the maid or like the head housekeeper person, lovely individual is blown away. It's just like, why are you doing this? This is almost at the point where it's too much. Like I'm already okay, but now you're like doing more to make me even greater. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you're not supposed to do this. And the main character's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Here's more. And like walks away, thinks nothing of it, kind of thing. That's the whole notion, where he does so much great but thinks nothing of it, and that only makes people grapple to him even more. But then again, Crowley, I want to be this other force, where he's the person that always makes sure, he knows that that's the nature of that person, which is a person who's basically gonna never accept anything. So Crowley has to basically work around that to make it so that no, you're gonna get yours. Like, you're gonna be okay. I'm gonna make sure you're gonna get paid. I'm gonna make sure you're not gonna do anything for free. You can say what you want to say, be who you want to be, but I'm not going to let that go. And the same thing can be said for the main character to Crowley. Crowley has a way of being kind of cold and sometimes like going too much into the area of evil, and the main character kind of pulls him back and like sets him straight, because he knows that even though you think you can do these evil things without feeling anything, I know it's going to have an effect. And he kind of helps him deal with that kind of stuff, and even sometimes bears the burden of those evil things as well, periodically throughout the story that I'm telling. Anyways, so ladies and gentlemen, we're about 50 some minutes in, and I've just caught you guys up to where we were last. Again, like 6 hours, maybe 12 hours actually, of me just rambling. That's insane. Most books, well, most novels are actually incredibly long, even like the voice acted ones. Regardless, that's me catching you guys up more or less on the story. Now, I would love to do what I just did, where I was basically like, here's this idea of this house that was thrown away, discarded. It also kind of hints at this kind of like human emotion / don't give up on people, love people to the fullest, all these kinds of things, and also be there for people, constantly build them up. And also there's this cool idea of, again, this house, as you upgrade it, as you put money into it, as you put your energy and power into it, and give it the ability to actually repair itself, therefore you can actually you'll be given more. Again, she has upgrades where like she eventually gives them like a huge bank to where they can actually store like billions and billions of dollars. She has the upgrade of allowing them to have like a spa where the water heals them in an instant. So there's like many cool, again, this is an idea where like this house, the upgrades that she could offer are endless and boundless. Also, an idea I had, which is way later down the line, was there's a choice for like, again, it was just another one of those ideas where like I wanted to cement the main character being this idea of, what are you talking about? Like, I would never choose not you, and that's like the sentiment for almost all of the people that matter to him. So again, he's given the option as like one of the final big upgrades is you can take away the spirit of the house. And you basically get like, it was something super valuable, like the ability to save the world, or get a shit ton of this or that, or maybe make like a crazy amount of money permanently, and all these kinds of things. Go back in time, like anything that's wild. And the main character says no, and then the other option would be restore the soul of the house to its former body or something like that, or even just something like, no, don't do that. Like I refuse this upgrade permanently. I don't want it anymore. Throw it away. Like if this is where the upgrade ends, then that's where it'll have to happen. and then for that to be an upgrade. To say no is it splits off and splinters off into like a different huge chain of upgrades. Whereas like it was a trick of like you could get this massive reward right now, or you could build to a much better reward, and the main character picks the much better reward. And it's like this sweet moment I thought would be cute. Anyways, where the person's like, oh my, what the fuck, and then it's a whole thing. Anyways, and then it's cringe. Cringe. So now I want to do the finally, I want to do the busy work. I want to talk to you guys about all of the ideas I had after this point. So what happens to Crowley? What happens to the main character? And what are the ideas that you have working around your brain, Grin? Let me talk to you guys about it. So we're going to go one by one. First thing, as soon as they get their house and they establish themselves, him and Crowley start like jumping into the catacombs, like this place where you can get money. And again, I think I even maybe talked about it, but they kind of like dip their foot in the door and they start going in there, and they end up finding like this cave off to the left. And it's this like weird, hard to see kind of other aspect of this dungeon, and it's basically this huge clearing with a shit ton of like high density monsters in there. And essentially, him and Crowley figure out a way of gaming the system. Of like, okay, these things, there's a shit ton of enemies here, and they constantly respawn. And they know that they've already done a dungeon to where they know when they pick up the end resource, like it kicks them out of the encounter and it seals the gate, and then the dungeon morphs with them almost to constantly make trials for everybody. So anyways, him and Crowley both figure out the idea of, what if we just don't collect this resource and we just wait for it to respawn? So him and Crowley basically start farming. and again, they're in a weird position because they actually can do this, because they made the most of Hell Knight, so they're already incredibly strong. So they start going rampant. I also had this idea of eventually they go home that night, and they realize that the more you do this, the more you let it reset and go, enemies start getting like hard, like there's more and more and more, and there's almost like a way to counter this like strat. So him and Crowley both basically leave, and they say, well, maybe in 24 hours cycle happens, it'll end, or like maybe it's a week, maybe it'll like chill out. And they're right, but when him and Crowley leave that night, the main character gets up in the middle of the night and goes back to that thing, because he knows it's a full moon. So he thinks, okay, I might as well go apeshit in here, and just be okay. The thing he doesn't know is Crowley actually followed him into that same dungeon, and yeah, this is a moment where Crowley actually gets to see his full tilt werewolf, which out through the whole series he only was able to dip into it and then like get out of it really quick. I kind of talked about it, but it's the idea of like if you were a werewolf, if you could turn it on really quick and turn it off so that you never transform, but you got this stupid high power buff, and that's how he kind of like hits hard as a truck kind of thing, and he kind of does that. Anyways, yeah, and for there to be this scene where Crowley's like just all he hears is like these just shredding, ripping, and this roar and this crazy sounds, and he finally like ducks behind a tree, and he hears this like giant black wolf behind him, like just like hovering over him, screaming. It's like classic werewolf. Very much reminds me of the werewolf of Van Helsing's Werewolf, the movie with Hugh Jackman. Yeah. But just this huge fucking mean looking wolf, and of course the main Crowley's like shitting his pants, like he's like, what the fuck, and Crowley doesn't even see him, but as soon as the wolf eventually takes off and starts like shredding things again, Crowley gets the fuck out of there, almost says like, that's too much. Like, also, I don't know if he wouldn't kill me in that state. He wouldn't kill him in that state. But anyways, there being that whole precursor thing. So again, if I were slowing down and like explaining everything to you guys, it would show that him and Crowley are getting more and more comfortable, whereas everyone seems to be dipping their foot in the puddle. They're diving straight into the pool, and just really making the most of it. And this is why, like, yeah, this is okay. So at this point, another thing that I would like to apply is that him and Crowley are both really, really trying to like stay under the radar, because they know that they're not stupid. They can, like, Crowley especially compares himself to everyone else, so he understands that they're different than everybody. Like, he's keeping an eye on how people are fighting within the dungeon, from afar and seeing like, wait, they're having trouble with this shit, and we're able to like clap it back in a second. Fast forward a couple weeks, him and Crowley both have agreed to like being super under the radar, like super under the radar. Like no one even knows their name, even though they're probably the strongest like dungeon dwellers in the whole kind of place. Also, one of the things I didn't mention is when because of it was kind of a way to like balance things out, but there's like a little girl who like they're like tiny people who can't go into the dungeons, who are monsters now and need blood from these vendors. So the world comes up with it could be anything. Of course, because I watch anime, I immediately think like an adventurers guild, but people who are able to adventure into the dungeons and actually collect this coin and bring this currency up into the world. It makes it so that all of these other monsters can basically exist in the real world without having to delve into the dungeon. So there is just this like super huge admiration for those willing to go into this horrible field and pull out like plunder for them, so that the world can operate above. So there's like this, just again, like passion and love for them for this. But him and Crowley don't want any of it. They could have been like the poster boys if they wanted to, but because they don't want to be on anybody's radar, because it's just a bad idea, and they talk about it, and regardless, fast forward a couple weeks, him and Crowley are like making bank, because they did these things, and because they like make the most out of this stuff. Also, they already were going in there really strong because they made the most of Hell Knight. They're like profiting like mad. So now, ladies and gentlemen, one of the ideas I had, which is kind of like the next precursor for the whole series, which is after him and Crowley are already kind of established strong, and of course there's many other like fun ideas that they've done, like him and Crowley go on kind of like Crowley asks him for some help one day. They go into the dungeon, and basically Crowley sets up like a mining depot. So they're like scaling mountains, and because the main character is a werewolf, he's able to like just jump super high heights and has incredible physical athletic prowess. So he's able to like climb a mountain, and he basically takes this like drill that Crowley gives him and smashes it into this ore on the side of a cliff. And this is Crowley's way of like, again, constantly gaining resource, and it's again another opportunity to show that like the main character in Crowley it's never even a choice, or not even a choice. It's never even like a possibility that they wouldn't help each other in this way, so that they keep doing that. So then Crowley's like, hey, can you help me with this? And it's like, done, let's do it. So that's another moment where I thought it'd be cool if, like, again, he's helping Crowley kind of mine out stuff, and he's using his benefit of being physically excessive, and using the wolf power to like jump across great distances, jump onto another rock, transform his hand to a wolf, jam his hand into the mountain, and like smash this drill and pike into the hill as well, and it mines out that ore. And it deposits into Crowley's inventory. So yeah, they're being this again, and that's just fueling Crowley's ability to make them weapons and stuff. So it is also helping the main character. So brand new ideas. The way I like Act 3, or maybe even Act 2 still, maybe like the end tier of Act 2, is getting into other characters. So it's, for the while now, it's just been the main character and Crowley kind of setting off and making the most of the dungeon. So now we're going to get into a new filter, which I think if you guys have an imagination, it's going rampant right now maybe. Here's a way to kind of narrow it in and let it play with a lot more ideas without drowning itself. So now we're getting into finding other monsters within the world of this crazy world I made, okay? So the first one that I wanted to talk to you guys about, I have a lot of ideas, so let me just try to, oh man, I got so much weird shit in my head that okay, so let's start with the one that's not as crazy, but I think it'd be still fun. So, one of the first things that I wanted was to establish another kind of character within the friend group of him and Crowley. And I feel like it would be weird if it was a woman first, because then it's just kind of weirdly like splitting the differences. I was like, oh, we have two dudes, let's let them meet a woman, you know. So I just felt like that wasn't right. So I came up with this idea of him and Crowley eventually. Oh man, I had this whole long-winded thing. Sorry. This dude, it's another male character, who is this dude who's like this Oni. Has this half horn coming out of his head, and he is strong as shit. And oh man, I wish I remembered exactly how I did everything with that character. But long story short, him and Crowley kind of meet or find him at the kind of checkpoint guild within the domain, the dungeon, and see that he's kind of being like no one wants to partner with him and stuff like that. And the reason why is because he's incredibly volatile. He doesn't know how to use his power, but then like sporadically he will. So in the guild, the people are like shitting on him, basically like, oh, this Oni guy, and of course him and Crowley are like eating or something, and they're seeing this. Long story short, him and Crowley find him in the middle of like the rain, like they're in the domain. By the way, I should have mentioned it again. It's like a massive forest area. I always think of that to be the first like kind of beginner domain area. Eventually, more like domains open, so you can go further in, kind of like Dimache or like Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in Dungeon? Same. So they find out that like again, this Oni has a problem with actually like using his power, and him and Crowley actually find him. Well, when it's raining in this forest domain, him and Crowley actually find him and see that he's like getting the shit kicked out of him by this like boar, this giant fucking evil looking boar. Anyways, it's like throwing him around. He can't summon forth his strength, and then of course him and Crowley start realizing like, oh, okay, this is the problem. This is why people were making fun of him, is because he can't, like, he's so strong, but then also incredibly weak all at the same time. Like, what's going on? And it's because he's a half Oni. So then him and Crowley both have a different way of kind of doing things. So the main character just trying to help him. So he's trying to stop the boar. He's trying like not to like, but he also just doesn't want to kill the boar because that would ruin the whole point. So Crowley's like, I'll talk to him, I'll get him to use his power, and then the main character's like, okay, I'll try to hold off the boar, let's do this. But Crowley, the way he does it is brutal, where he almost is like a mean father trying to get his son to swim by throwing him in the deep end and saying, figure it out, and as soon as he's about to pass out, the father picks him up and it's like, all right, we'll try it again tomorrow, and chucks him in the deep end again, you know. So Crowley's talking to him and he's like, what the hell's going on? You're afraid. Like, you're not accepting this monster inside of yourself. You're not allowing it to go. You keep holding back for whatever reason. And then eventually, for there to be this moment where the Oni guy finally owns up and explains what happened, but there being this backstory where when Hell Night took place, his dad was this police officer, and he went out to go find him, and he ended up killing him because of his excessive strength. It could be 1,000 different ways. Maybe he went in for a hug and he broke his fucking back. I don't know. Maybe he did something and caused him to die. I don't know. Regardless, he has this fear now of his power because it actually hurt someone he loved. And Crowley kind of is like, oh, that'll do it. Like that'll fuck up anybody. If you're this monster part of yourself actually harmed someone you cared so much about, it would stifle anyone's kind of ability to go. So I don't know what it was. I think I had like this moment in my head. I had this moment mapped out where the main character basically says something so simple, but like basically says, your father would have been proud of you. Your father would have like wanted you to be able to survive. Like I'm sure your father has zero like no one would have been able to expect that. Your father wouldn't have expected you to be like, oh yeah, you're immediately able to manage the thing you're able to do. I think your father would have had more of a problem with you just rolling over and dying right now. And then him remembering that his father was like a cop who was like crazy dedicated and would just push through adversity all the time. So instead of wanting to die for his mistake, he chooses to honor his father by fighting, by surviving, by understanding this hardship in front of him. And also, in the same thing, him and Crowley both help him out. I think I had a much more like uniform idea of how the hell he even goes through it, and like his trauma and all these kind of things that actually made me tear up when thinking about it, because I made it actually like hit in a way, because again, it was just a notion of like a person being like, again, it was really tied within like the love of a son for his dad, and I made myself tear up when thinking of this idea, but I completely lost this idea, which is also why I want to get these ideas out, so that I just feel better about them, so that I don't lose them to my decaying memory. Anyways, after they're done helping the shit out of him, and helping him basically learn how to like, okay, it's okay to accept the monster and to let it like go loose when you need to survive and all these kinds of things, and not to hide from it. But then the dude starts like kind of really hanging around them because no other person wanted to be in his team, because he's a weird fucking, like, again, nobody wanted him, so he's like, these people actually help me out, and they seem like they're strong, and like, why would I not try to be a part of their group or try to help them because they help me and all these things. So he hangs around with them. Eventually they cave. They invite him into the mansion with them. So now you have these three musketeers kind of going into the dungeon every now and again, and very, very slowly him and Crowley start like letting him in on what's going on. Most people in the world still don't know what artifacts are and like how important they are to your success in your monster nature. Okay, so that was idea one of this, like, kind of basically the idea was the sealed Oni. That was what I called it, actually. I think I have a thing for it, even. If I wanted to, I could go back and, like, really clarify that, because I made a whole point. Yeah, I did. I made a whole Word doc. Like, I remember that being the name, the Sealed Oni. But yeah, the Sealed Oni being that guy's situation again. As soon as he comes and like deals with his trauma, he's able to just wield this incredible strength. And his character design, I had him as like this dude who had a huge fucking bat, a spiked bat, and then he's able to turn on this like absolutely eviscerating like level of strength, like almost on the same level as the main character, but maybe just because the main character actually, him and Crowley actually like profited so much from just leveling, he's not. Maybe almost on the same strength level as him, but if the Oni ever did level up, he'd be beyond him. But the other character, and this is the idea that I kind of always regretted not talking to you guys about, because I thought it was really, really fun. So here's this idea. Also, we're gonna have to wrap this up. I told you guys more or less of what I wanted. And the only thing that I hate myself is that I'm not able to tell you guys the situations in which would make this character flow into the story, which would actually be pretty cool. Anyways. So, I had this idea for a character that I thought would be really cool, and it's the notion of, okay, so we're in this world, everyone chose a monster, but this person, and I think I even came up with that weird backstory where if you had some sort of like deep lineage of like some sort of thing in your past, of like maybe werewolves existed in the way back in the day, and maybe you have like a DNA strain of them in you, so that there's like this maybe contention with when Hell Night happened, you got turned on into a werewolf. This could maybe like battle with that a little bit, which would make sense why the character's half werewolf, half necromancer, because he dressed up like a necromancer lich, and yeah, he had like ancient werewolf blood in him. Whatever, that we're getting a lot. Anyways, I always thought there would be this really cool idea if there was a living armor. Akamaga kill. No, that's wrong. Kill a kill is what it is. Not Akamaga kill, please. Jesus Christ, nightmare, bad for the soul. Kill a kill has this idea of like a living armor. This isn't what popped into my mind when I did it. I'll tell you guys why it popped in my mind. So I had this idea of, okay, wouldn't it be really cool if there was like a vampire character? Maybe I don't really, not really, honestly. I just don't know. It just doesn't really seem like it seems boring a little bit. I know werewolf boring, but mine's fucking werewolf lich. Anyways, and then I was like, okay, well maybe there could be another werewolf. Okay, then that's boring. So then I thought of this. This was like weird, like my brain just sparked alive and came up with this weird shit, which I don't think is really connected to each other. But I thought, okay, well, what if there was this? What if long ago there were these, like, this group of slayers, these people that destroyed all werewolves and monsters alike, specifically werewolves and monsters. Maybe this is back in the day of King Arthur and all these kind of things. This order created this suit. This suit that basically the best slayer that they ever had, a best hunter, whatever, maybe it was worn by Van Helsing, I don't care. Regardless, this slayer killed so many werewolves and vampires that their blood eventually seeped into the armor, and turning him in to an actual vampire and werewolf cross. Person eventually dies with his armor. The armor goes, like, poofs out of nowhere. Hell Night takes place. There's this girl who basically, boom, gets this armor put on her, and that's essentially kind of the idea. Is there's this kind of badass vampire with white hair, with this crazy armor that looks like there's like, again, it just looks metal as fuck. Kind of looks like Daedric kind of armor, except without the red, but the kind of like spiky, got like crazy gauntlet kind of hand. You know what I'm saying? Like that black kind of steel that looks like it's cursed. Cursed shit. But also looks like perfectly made as well. Like there's aspects of it that look like scratchy and rigid, but then there's these other parts that look delicate and like perfectly shaped by like a master craftsman. Long story short, the main character finds this person collapsed. He's like going through a tomb and he finds this like white-haired person collapsed on the ground, and really quickly the main character figures out, and again I think I said something to it, that the house of had basically a library. He unlocked a wing of like a ton of information, so him and Crowley have just a ton of information about how most things happen, so he's able to understand that like the vibe, the instinct of when he's interacting with another monster. When he flips the page, he sees a vampire, he gets this kind of like, the wolf starts sending him a signal. And then when he flips the thing and he sees a ghoul, the wolf starts sending him a different kind of feeling, a different signal. So he memorizes those feelings and he understands what he sees. But he kind of is shocked when he sees this person because he's getting two signals. He's getting a vampire and a wolf, and even some other weird like lingering shit like ghoul and all this other shit coming from this person. He's kind of baffled. He almost thinks there's multiple people in the room or this is a trap. But he eventually realizes that this person who looks like her cheeks are hollowed out and she's got like bags under her eyes and she's got this really long hair, a long white hair. And again, she's wearing this crazy armor. So eventually I don't know how I had it happen, but the main character at some point I think clues in to knowing what happens. And I think... Yeah, there's this like, I think she had like a red cape or something, and on the buckle of the red cape by her shoulder blade was this kind of like crazy teeth looking thing. And anyways, it like comes alive and bites the main character in the neck as he like leans down and puts his hand on her shoulder, and it's like, are you okay? Or can you wake up? And then he gets basically bit on the neck by this thing, and instead of like ripping it apart, he kind of understands. I don't know how okay, let's do this. He basically sates the hunger of the armor. He's able to quickly deduct that, okay, this thing's hungry, and she's basically she's low on the tap. She doesn't have any stuff left. So I don't know if I want the armor to kind of forcibly. I don't think I want that. I don't think I want the armor to basically come alive and like bite into him. I think I would rather him like say, "Are you good? Are you okay?" And she kind of wakes up, comes to, and kind of like, "How long has it been? How long have I been out?" And then for him to basically clue into what she needs before she even knows it. So I think he slashes his bicep, because I think I gave him like bone hands because of the necromancer or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, he slashes his bicep and he kind of tips his hand over her armor, and she's kind of confused. And as his blood starts dripping on the armor, she starts feeling more and more of herself come back. And then she kind of looks at him like, what the fuck? Like, how did you do that? I feel like shit, and I feel like I was like, losing myself and all that kind of stuff. And then he explains it like, how long have you gone without like, food? And then she's like, what do you mean? I'm not a vampire or something like that. And he's like, okay, well, maybe you're not, but your armor is. And he's kind of baffled by this notion. And again, the notion is, my idea was a person with living armor, and is like, that armor as well, it's like, it's not like it's a part of them. It's not like you can just take it off and be done. Like, she can de-equip, but it's still there, it's still like ready to fucking pounce if it needs to be. Anyways, so that was the other idea that I had that I thought would be really fun for like a monster kind of hybrid for the main character to find, and for him to also be this like kind of, again, super willing to help, super willing to like pick them up and show them how to do things and show them the ropes, and also he's fully willing to like be a blood bag until she figures shit out. And then he kind of coaches her with the werewolf side as well as the vampire side. And then another thing that we talked about, I think, which is every time there's this event that can take place in the catacombs, which is like every full moon or every some odd days, there's a moment where you can go into the catacombs, but it's super dangerous. But when you go in there, it's just kind of like Hell Night, where now there are artifacts where if you go in there, you can get a good artifact for people. That way it's not just like you can never get a skill tree or like an understanding of what your skill tree is if you don't have this artifact. Yeah, so you people who are super like ground zero, he helps go into him and Crowley help go into to the fucking catacombs and find their relic. And then he helps doing that for all of them. And then eventually, that's the notion of the story, guys, is that this is like Act 3, which could take forever, where we're introducing new characters and they're starting to make like a family / a mafia boss / like this big organization, or they just keep finding good people that could use help and are actually like not gonna fuck them over, and helping them like build each other up. And then that's kind of the fun, is him and Crowley had like their massive moment to shine. So now as a viewer, you kind of get to see how these people come into fruition. And I think sometimes that can be boring if the characters, in my opinion, aren't really unique. Like again, I think the notion of like there's this chick who's a badass vampire hybrid of 1,000 different monsters because the blood of all of the monsters that were slain seeped into the armor, and kind of made it the very thing that they were fighting against. And for the armor to be hungry, to need to be fed either by killing monsters or by taking blood from innocents, or like ravaging things through like the werewolf's nature, or all those things. and for the main character to basically be shepherding this person through the thing, and then for Crowley to have his own kind of people that are helping, and then they both intersect with each other and help when they ever need help, and stuff like that. And then the other idea I had that I'll throw out there, which I thought would just be fun. Haven't really developed it too much, but it's I always like the notion of a Tinkerbell. Like if the main character in this world of monsters, if there was like a fairy thing, and the fairy was like thrown out of her like clan, and was like struggling to survive, but the main character's like, hey, you good? And then they shoot the shit, and he's like, okay, you're a good person, cool. What if I bet on you? What if I bet 100 million on you? And then to just make this tiny little pixie the fucking like a death orb that anything it comes into contact with just gets devoured, and it becomes like this ultimate powered thing, but also is entirely loyal to the thing. So again, it kind of starts becoming like a shonen mafia organization boss, where the main character, without even knowing it, starts building like an empire more and more and more, introducing more interesting monsters and characters, and slowly but surely they start building more and more and more, and then you eventually have this like huge gang of misfits, but also people that are super jacked up and powerful. And that did kind of be the sentiment, and then for there to be a bunch of like conflicts with like other organizations eventually figuring out how powerful they are and then coming after them, and then them destroying them, and like finding out ways, and then like having moments where Crowley shines with his cunning and deception and wit, and then for there to be other moments where the main character can kind of just plow through just about everyone because of his just ferocious strength. Whenever Crowley's plan fails, he can just pick up the pieces and make something happen, and that to be kind of the notion of the overarching story. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Sealed Oni, the girl with living armor that happens to be like kind of a cheat sheet into every kind of beast mode armor, as well as a fairy, as well as a little Tinkerbell kind of companion for our main character, as well as does her own thing. And then there's 1,000 other ideas that could take place in this monster world fucking weird fest. There could be hybrids that the main character can meet, all of those things. But ladies and gentlemen, I have to stream in an hour and a half, so I have to leave you. But there'll be another podcast, maybe not incredibly soon, because this is an hour and 20 minutes that I have to edit. And oh my god, the first one I recorded, which is going to be the second one I upload, was like a fucking almost 2 hours. Oh no, oh god. But ladies and gentlemen, I still have so much story stuff that I want to talk your ear off about this world. I haven't told you guys just about everything, and again, it kind of breaks my heart because I don't think I delivered the Sealed Oni as well as I could, because again, the whole reason why it was like it's significantly less creative is because, like, again, it's not like a living armor with all kinds of monsters in it. The reason why it's less creative in that regard is because I made it really emotional. I made it like I tried to unveil it in a way that made it so that like it was kind of sad, and like there's this this My Hero Academia pushing through adversity kind of feeling when you find out the whole bells and whistles. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this is me wrapping up. Not really wrapping up. Again, I feel like we'll come back to this at some point because I had such a fun time with the ideas that we talked about in this kind of whole story bit of business. And yeah, hopefully anyone who's a writer or anything like that, it could maybe take this as like a weird assignment to like give me some twists, give me some turns, come up with some own monsters that they would accept into their kind of like weird mafia kind of guild, into their big ass house, and tell me any ideas that might be cool, like a living house that it changes as you upgrade it, and all those things. So yeah, I would love to know about any of those kinds of things. That's the whole point of this podcast, is just kind of flourish your imagination and give you something to think about. And to share cool ideas. If you guys have seen media or manga or stories that have really cool concepts, and maybe even throw those down in the comments below of like interesting concepts that like we could play with in our minds. And I may even do that in the future, where I might be like, hey guys, let me know exactly what kind of cool ideas you have, and I'll just roll with it. So you give me any premise, and I'll try to make something up on the spot, and we'll create something in one podcast together, with all the premises that you guys can give me. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I hope you guys do enjoy the rest of your day. I'm happy to be back with this podcast. Hopefully you guys don't hate my voice or are sick and tired of me, because it's a lot. Again, the next podcast is going to be a lot. But I think the next story kind of idea I have, guys, which is wrapped up more or less in the next part, or the next podcast, is a fun one. Hopefully you guys can tune in and check that out. Thank you so much for giving me so much of your time, and goodbye. Also, you can share this. That'd be dope too. Although, I don't know. It's probably not that good. Not that good of an idea. But anyways, thank you and goodbye.